Hello, my name is Sydney. Today, my partner Paige and I are presenting about an organization and the lack of organizational commitment seen throughout 15 of their employees. The organization we partner with is Nellis at Autumn Lake, and it is an assisted living facility located in Elkins. There has been turnover in the nursing staff, and we wanted to see what factors were affecting organizational commitment. So, we did research to see if there was any correlation between 5 variables in organizational commitment. Here is a research model consisting of 5 independent variables on the right and 1 dependent variable on the left. On the left, we have job satisfaction, LMX, distributive justice, psychological safety, and burnout. On the right, we have organizational commitment. On the next slide, I'm going to dive deeper into our variables. As I just said, there are 5 different independent variables on the left-hand side that we'll be measuring. Our first variable is job satisfaction. We thought this variable was appropriate because no employee will commit to their organization if they aren't happy with their job. Next, we have LMX, short for Leader Membership Exchange Theory. This term means the relationship between the employee and leaders or other employees. If you have high LMX, you will be committed to your organization. The third is distributive justice. We wanted to measure how fairly employees felt they were treated and compensated. Fourth is psychological safety, which is what we measured how comfortable employees felt at work. For example, this could be something like speaking up if something is wrong. Lastly, we have job burnout. If employees struggle to come to work and have low motivation, they probably have low organizational commitment. As you can see, all of them have a positive relationship except for job burnout. Now we go to our dependent variable, which is organizational commitment. We want to see how each independent variable correlates with the dependent variable. Now I'm going to briefly go over each research question and hypothesis after that. Question 1, we expect that job satisfaction is positively related to organizational commitment. Question 2, we expect that LMX is positively correlated with organizational commitment. Question 3, we expect that distributive justice is positively correlated with organizational commitment. Question 4, we expect that psychological safety is positively correlated with organizational commitment. And then question 5, we expect that job burnout is negatively correlated with organizational commitment. Our hypothesis, as you can probably see, is that organizational commitment will be positive if each variable is positive, except for a burnout. Now we'll go over methods. Our survey was distributed by email and printouts with a QR link that would take them to the survey. We had 16 responses, but only 15 usable responses due to the incompletion of 1. The mean age of the group is 51.54 years with a standard deviation of 11.24, which means on average the difference between the mean and the actual age is 11.24. We had both male and female survey participants with a mean of 7.01 years being employed with Nellis, and the standard deviation to this mean was 7.18. We were asked to not include any demographic questions about the job group, salary, and position due to privacy concerns on behalf of Nellis. The data was obtained by creating a survey using the platform Qualtrics. We used a platform called Theory On, which allowed us to look up our variables and receive survey questions for each factor. After creating a well-constructed survey, we distributed the link to the survey to the administrator of the facility. All of our variables in the survey were measured on a 5-point Likert scale in the survey. Job satisfaction, organizational commitment, and psychological safety was measured on an agree to disagree scale. And LMX and distributive were also measured on a Likert agree to disagree scale, but with a matrix table. Burnout was different. We measured it on a 5-point frequency Likert scale.
After we got our results back from Qualtrics, we were able to convert that Qualtrics file into an Excel file. And then next, we needed to clean the data to make it usable for our analysis. So we went through every submission and found instances where there might be missing answers or instances where like people spent too much time on the survey or too little time. So in the end, we ended up deleting one of our responses because they hadn't answered any of their questions. So that left us with 15 responses to fully analyze. And then after that, we also went through the data and reverse scored items that we had previously determined in the survey design phase. So next, we're going to be going through our results from analyzing the data. For our first pairing of job satisfaction and organizational commitment, we had predicted that job satisfaction would be positively related to organizational commitment. And we found a correlation coefficient of 0.68, which indicates that there is a very strong positive relationship between job satisfaction and organizational commitment. And we also got a p-value of 0.0048, and anything below 0.05 is considered statistically significant. So in this case, we're going to reject the null hypothesis, and this means that there is a positive relationship between the two variables, and the effect is actually occurring. For our next research question, we believe that there would be a positive correlation between leadership member exchange and organizational commitment. And for these values, we found a correlation coefficient of 0.86, which indicates a very strong positive relationship between the variables. And we can see this in the upward slope in the graph. We also received a p-value way below 0.05, which indicates that the results are statistically significant. So we can reject the null hypothesis, which means that the effect is actually happening between these two variables. And with an increase in positive leadership member exchange, we're going to see higher organizational commitment and vice versa. For the next relationship between distributive justice and organizational commitment, we predicted that distributive justice would be positively correlated with organizational commitment. And we saw a correlation coefficient of 0.43, which means that there's less of a linear relationship between the two variables. In the graph, we see a slight upward slope, but there just seems to be a lot more variance in the answers. And our p-value was 0.11, which is higher than the cutoff of 0.05. So we will accept the null hypothesis. And when we accept the null hypothesis, this indicates that we're proving an effect doesn't exist between the two variables. For our fourth research question, we had predicted that psychological safety would be positively correlated with organizational commitment. And the correlation coefficient for these two variables equated to 0.65, and this indicates there's a strong positive relationship between these two variables. And it also received a p-value of 0.008, which is lower than the cutoff of 0.05, which indicates that our relationship between these two variables is statistically significant. So we're going to reject the null hypothesis and accept our alternative hypothesis. And based on these results, we can assume there is a positive linear relationship between psychological safety and organizational commitment. For our last research question, we had hypothesized that job burnout would be negatively correlated with organizational commitment. And this correlation coefficient came out to be 0.36, which indicates there's a small positive correlation between these two variables. We had expected it to be negative, even after changing our reverse score. But we think maybe this is due to possible outliers, and there seems to be a lot of variance in our results. Our p-value was estimated to be 0.19, which is higher than the cutoff of 0.05 to be statistically significant. So this means we're going to accept the null hypothesis, and because just the data shows that there isn't a significant correlation between the two variables. The following will be a few recommendations that we have compiled for NELAs based on our analysis. So for job satisfaction, we think that NELA should be putting special emphasis on making sure that employees value their work. The factors that influence job satisfaction include supervisors, the work itself, work colleagues, compensation, and promotion opportunities. So by enhancing perceptions of job satisfaction, they will see an increase in organizational commitment. Additionally, our results for leadership member exchanges showed that workers seem to value quality exchanges with supervisors and administration. And these relationships are built through interpersonal exchanges in which parties to the relationship value their ability, benevolence, and integrity of each other. And these exchanges directly correlate to organizational commitment. And based on our research data, we propose that NELA should continue to foster these positive leadership member exchanges in order to keep employees committed to the organization. And lastly, we saw results for psychological safety and organizational commitment that were statistically significant. Psychological safety is the idea that employees can speak up without risk of consequences. And this safety allows employees to be motivated to do their tasks and have open communication with their leaders and coworkers. And according to research conducted by the Research Technology Management, psychological safety can motivate employees to take the initiative that can lead to task performance, knowledge sharing, and organizational commitment. So we recommend that NELs make extra effort to make sure that employees are able to voice their views to people in their hierarchy. Having an environment that fosters these conversations will result in more organizational commitment for its employees. So next we're going to be talking about what we would do differently if we were to do this whole project over again. So the first issue we came across is that we really needed an increase in our sample size. We only got 15 responses, which really prohibit us from making inferences that are statistically significant. Small sample sizes are also really prone to outliers and will just affect our data in general. And additionally, we want to recommend adding more variables in our future surveys. So while we were able to discover some effects, if we had more variables, we would be able to make more connections and provide more recommendations for the organization. So we just have to be wary of not including too many variables because it could result in respondent fatigue. And lastly, we would just like to see an added demographic question that includes job group or department in the organization so we can isolate some of the effects that are in the data. We'd be able to tell if a specific job group is increasingly dissatisfied and then provide insights to managers that will be meaningful.